My name's Aaron Harris. I'm a partner at Y Combinator, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my experience at YC and how crashing the company that I started at YC has actually made me better at being a partner, giving advice and helping people avoid the same fate that we endured. So that's a reasonably decent picture of me. Ignore the watermark behind it, and that's how you can find me on Twitter. If anyone wants to get in touch, that's probably the best way to do it. So what is Y Combinator? I know a lot of people know, but the truth is a lot of people are kind of confused about what we do. It's actually pretty simple. YC is actually just a big orange room where once a week we have really interesting speakers. This is Mitch Caper. Come and talk to our founders and tell them, you know, here's what happened to me when I started my startup. Here are the things that I learned. Here are the things that I screwed up, did well, funny stories, war stories, all these kinds of things. And it's pretty great because sitting out there, especially as someone who is a first-time founder, you have no idea what's going on. And at YC, our goal is to take really, really amazing founders, whether first-time or repeat founders, and try to make them better, try to give them advice along with some money, and improve their chances of success. So actually, this was my YC batch, and that's me right over there. I'm lucky I made it into the frame of this shot because I almost got bumped off, and then I wouldn't have a good visual. But this was me in winter of 2011, so about 4 years ago. I went through Y Combinator with my company, Tutorspree. Now, when we first came up with the idea for Tutorspree, we had really, really bad design skills. And this is basically what we put up. And we said, we're going to make an online system for connecting parents and tutors for one-on-one learning. We're like, this is going to be amazing. No one's ever tried anything like this before. It's revolutionary. It's amazing. What's the first step? Well, we're going to send out a lot of emails to people and just try to sign up a bunch of tutors. And in order to do that, we needed a sign-up form. And so we put this up. Now, I wouldn't call this a launch of any kind because maybe 30 people saw it. But we sent it out to a couple people, and we didn't make a big deal. We didn't want to send it out to everyone we ever knew because we thought, not really ready to be a company, not ready for launch. We couldn't set up any lessons. We couldn't take payment. We didn't have profiles. We didn't really have anything. It was really just a landing page. And so we went back to the drawing board. We're like, okay, we got to make this a little better. It's got to be prettier. Let's show everyone all the tutors that we have. And maybe now we're ready to be a real company. Now we're ready to, go raise money and like do this thing and do that thing and run people through it. But actually, this was still just a landing page. And while it had a little bit more, honestly, still not ready. But it was at this point that we said, okay, we want to build this. We're committing to this full time. Let's see what we can do. And so we went and applied to Y Combinator. And we applied with just the shell of the website. This is actually roughly what we applied to YC with. Still not that great looking. And really, really basic functionality. Basically, if you filled that little form out, if you entered an address, it would show you a list of local tutors. And we could kind of match you up with them, but we couldn't take any payment from you. We had maybe 20 profiles on the site. Really not much there. But we got into YC anyway because apparently we fooled them into thinking that we were actually fairly credible and fairly good and had some idea of what we were doing. And as soon as we got there, PG said, okay, launch. Like, no. We're not ready to launch. Like, it's unpolished. It doesn't do the thing. We don't have full coverage in all of our cities. We said, no. Launch. Like, we got to build all these new features. We know that people are going to want fancy scheduling. Launch this, launch that. And he kept hammering away at us, and we said, oh, what the hell? Let's just launch the damn site and see what happened. And that was terrifying. That was kind of a weird moment because we didn't have any idea whether or not anyone would actually react to this thing. Would anyone actually use it beyond the friends that we had forced to create profiles? And on the day of our launch, we got this really nice headline off TechCrunch that Tutorspree was the Airbnb for tutoring, which was exactly our message. That was our pitch. Airbnb for tutoring, that's so cool. Airbnb was YC, we're YC. They help people make money off things that they have. It's gonna be great. Our basic logic boiled down to this. Airbnb is successful. We're kind of like Airbnb. therefore we'll be successful. It was simple. It was honestly, it was a foolproof plan. It couldn't fail. And we even worked out a really nice flow for how our customers would interact with us. Parents or students would get to the site, they'd search for a tutor, they'd find the tutor, they'd send that tutor a message, and we would make money. The problem was it didn't work. There was this thing that we saw that started to happen where we definitely had people starting to come to the site and looking for tutors. We got that because we had had some nice press. And they were actually sort of finding tutors because we were localized to the Bay Area and to New York. And we said, if you're here, enter your information, a tutor's gonna pop up. We were pushing through as many tutors as we possibly could. And then we're like, okay, now the Airbnb thing happens, right? We grow, we get really rich, everyone's happy, amazing. But there was something funny happening between the finding the tutor and the booking the lesson. And we weren't sure what it was, but we started taking a look at our messaging layer and actually watching the message traffic go back and forth between parents and tutors, or students and tutors, and watch what was coming back. And this really weird thing started happening that was completely counter to what we believed before we had launched Tutorspree. We had this perfect platonic ideal of what our company would be, of how the users would actually use it. And the real world brutally reminded us that we were wrong. And so here's the things that we learned. First of all, our customers weren't students as we initially believed. We thought, well, if the student was matching up with the tutor, that meant the student was the customer. But in reality, the parents were the ones paying for things and they were the customer, which is a completely different set of user behaviors and user models around what actually people want and how they're gonna interact. And so the thing that we were missing in this wide open marketplace model where people were basically bidding on tutors and tutors had all these crazy prices and no one knew what to do with anything, was that we were lacking trust. And what we really needed was the trust of not just the students, not just the tutors, but of the parents. And we didn't know how to get that. We didn't know why they weren't using it. We could kind of see in the messaging that people were not responding at quite the level that we needed them to, but we had no idea why. And so the thing we needed to do was we needed to talk to them. And we needed to talk to them a lot. This is one of these really unsexy things. It's the thing that you don't want to think about as a founder. You want to think that, okay, I built this brilliant product. I'm perfect, it's perfect, right? So therefore, it's going to do great. The users will do what I tell them to do. There's actually a core message that we tell our startups at YC, and this was like me learning a lesson really well by running face first into a brick wall, which is probably the best way to learn things because otherwise you don't really remember it. And the truth is what you have to do is you have to get the product out there and then you have to talk to the users who you think are going to use it, who you want to use it. But more important than the ones that you think are going to use it, you have to talk to the people who are actually using your product. Because if you haven't talked to the people who are actually using it, you won't understand the behaviors that they're going through while using it or their rationale for wanting to use it. And so we started doing this thing where we were talking to them, and it actually led us to completely change the core model of Tutorspree. We realized that we weren't this wide open marketplace. We were not this ideal of a place where people magically find each other and agree to pay one another for lessons. We were a system where we actually had to hold hands. We had to work with each parent and make sure that they were happy until we really figured out how things were going. So we did that. And it worked really, really well. In fact, in the 6 months between when we started doing that, well, within 6 months, we increased our revenue dramatically. We'd increased our profit even more dramatically. And the thing that was actually most important to us was we increased the engagement of our customers by 3 times. That meant they were doing 3 times more lessons. They were also getting to the point of booking lessons much more quickly. They were much more satisfied. They sent us love notes instead of hate mail, which was better. We were on the phones with them, so they knew us. They saw us as a partner and not just a random utility that they could run back and forth, in from and away from. And we never would have known that had we sat inside of our office, which was just the living room of our apartment, not putting a product out, and had we not been talking to the customers. And that's the core of Y Combinator. We actually tell our companies that there's really only two things to do during YC. You write code and you talk to your users. And by doing those two things, you end up making something people want. And at the end of the day, a startup is about making something people want. A company is about making something people want. Now, there are variations of this. You could say you make something people need. But the truth is, if you make something people need and they don't want it, they're probably not going to use it that much. And certainly they're not going to tell their friends about it. There aren't a lot of school kids, let's say a lot of kindergartners, who are really excited about broccoli. But they probably need to eat broccoli. They don't want to, but they need to. And so if you can get to want, if you can be the thing that people really want, that's when you start winning. And as we started building this product that was working, as people were starting to interact with it more, we noticed that more people were showing up at the site. We hadn't really thought enough about why that was happening. And what we discovered was there was a very good reason why it was happening. There were some very intelligent people sitting in some buildings in this campus creating algorithms that were sending people to our site. Google was where we got our customers. And we were getting our customers because at that point we had created something that customers actually wanted, which Google saw and measured. Google saw people hitting our site, sticking around, transacting, and it worked out really, really well for us. And so let's put that aside for a second. We said, okay, well, SEO is working really, really well for us. Just brilliantly good traffic. It's basically free for us, converts really well, amazing. What else should we be thinking about? Well, we had ideas around other things, right? I mean, there are other ways to acquire customers. You got display advertising, Facebook, SEM. We started to do partnerships. We talked about doing rev shares. We talked about doing affiliate marketing, giveaways, flyering communities. We talked to administrators of schools, PTAs, colleges. We tried to get guest blogs, and everything we did paled in comparison to the channel that we had. But that led us to do something a little strange. Because as we were focused on SEO, we actually started forgetting about our customers. We started forgetting about what it was they wanted and started thinking only of what was going to drive more traffic to the site. So we basically tried to play games with SEO. We didn't do anything particularly shady, but what we did start doing was things that were probably not what customers actually wanted. And Google picked up on that because the algorithms are designed to send people to the things that they want. And so on March 16th of 2013, our traffic fell by 80% overnight. It was a really crappy morning. Along with our traffic dropping, our revenue fell off a cliff, our customers couldn't find us, new customers couldn't find us, and everything basically went to hell. And we sat around and we kind of were tearing our hair and trying to figure out, well, what was it that caused this to happen? Hadn't we done the right things? We had some customers that liked us, they found us, they were using us, so what was going on? So we started trying to figure out why it was that Google had decided that we were no longer making a thing as good as our customers wanted, because they were starting to bounce more, they were getting more confused. And that's when we started learning about the algorithm updates. Now, we had known how the algorithm worked when we started Tutorspree. We'd paid a lot of attention to it, and it dovetailed perfectly with our strategy for making something that our customers actually wanted. But the new algorithm saw that we were doing things that weren't great. We had duplicate content within our site because we had tried to create a lot of pages representing different categories. We hadn't done it in the best way. We had thin content on pages. So for instance, we had a single math tutor in, let's say, Wichita, Kansas. And for that one math tutor, we had a page for math tutors, algebra tutors, calculus 2 tutors, and trigonometry tutors. That one tutor was showing up on 7 or 8 pages and is the only content on that page. That was bad. If a customer had hit that page and then said, oh, well, let me see what else you have, they were going to see the same thing again and again, get frustrated, decide we were full of crap, and leave. And that's what we were learning. Wrapped up in that was the fact that our navigation wasn't good enough. people couldn't find their way around the site. Yeah, they could get from the home page to one other page, but we discovered they were actually landing on deeper pages first, and then not understanding what they were going to have to do to get to where they needed. And finally, the freshness of our pages, the speed with which we updated the pages and actually made things look like somebody was home, fell off. And so looking at all that, what we realized was we had gotten lazy. We had a model originally in the first days of Tutorspree of how Tutorspree worked. And we brought that out to market and discovered it was wrong, and that led to all this great iteration and all this great building of what people wanted us to do, which is like the core message of YC. But then we were out of YC, and we stopped paying attention to some of these signals. And as a result, we started optimizing not towards what our customers wanted, but what we perceived certain channels wanted us to do in order to bring customers to us. So we took a step back, and we redesigned everything about the site. We actually built the site to be what our customers wanted, to model on their behaviors of how they worked through the flow of our site, how we held their hands, how we matched them up with tutors, how we resolved conflicts with tutors or made them happy when things went wrong. And in doing so, we completely changed the architecture of the site and what we had. We cut over 1 million pages from the site. We made sure that every single important page had fresh, good, useful content that explained to our users exactly what was on that page, what kind of value they'd get from it, what they could expect to pay for tutors, all kinds of good information that they actually found useful. At the same time, we eliminated duplicate geographies. If someone was looking for 90023, they should see the same thing as 90024, or that location if they entered in words. In New York, say 1023 and 1024, both the Upper West Side of Manhattan. They should show the same page. And as we started doing this, we started seeing improvements. Our rankings on Google improved. Our better UX and better UI led to our customers being happier. And overall, our site was faster, it was friendlier, and quite frankly, it was just straight up betterer, which is not a word, for all of our customers. And it was great. It was starting to work really well. But at the end of the day, it didn't help enough. When you try to get to Tutorspree now, you just get a 404. The reason was we had fallen too far behind in that process. You know, startups basically are constantly fighting, in my mind, against two things. They're fighting against apathy because no one knows who you are. No one cares who you are. And they're fighting against time. You only have a certain amount of time to do things, and that's whether you run out of money, or the people who work for you get bored, or the customers who you thought you had decide you're not doing the things that they want. Any of those things could kill you. And for us, what it came down to was we realized that we just could not put enough people onto the site in the way that we thought was best to keep it as a rapidly scaling business. It was pretty tough to understand because we had gotten lazy, right? We had forgotten the right things to do. And by doing that, we had doomed our own startup. And that's kind of a tough thing to say when you spend 2 or 3 years of your life on something. But what it does is it makes it so that when I talk to our new companies, to new companies in the batch, I can tell them how important it is to just get their product out there and to iterate. And not only that, never stop iterating, right? Launching doesn't just mean getting your site up on the internet for the first time or getting your first press hit. It means constantly launching things for your users that they want to use, that they love, that make them happy. Because if you do that, you actually make something that they want. At the end of the day, that's the only thing that counts. So if you ever find yourself drifting away from what people want, and you can track that in a million ways, you can use Google Analytics to see how people are interacting with your site, you can watch your revenue, you can watch your user growth, engagement, all these things. If you find that you're moving away from what they want, and you're honest about that, then you just repeat the first step. You figure out what they want, you talk to them, and you launch new things. And that's kind of the message that I try to give to every single one of our founders. And hopefully it'll sink in better for them than it did for me. That's it. Thank you. What? Oh, thanks. I think I have about 10 minutes left. If anyone has any questions, be happy to answer them. I also have two of my partners, Kevin Hales back there, and Kat Minyalik is over there, so they can also, I'm volunteering them to answer questions as well. If anyone has specific questions about YC afterwards, we'll be hanging around. So, any questions? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, when our traffic dropped off, like, why did it do that? Didn't people still need tutors? And so the reason that we, like our core hypothesis on this, is that it's an incredibly fragmented market. And actually, most of the tutoring goes to these little mom and pop shops that are local. And that's what we were fighting with. So we had to create a better experience than local recommendation from one person to another. And that's really, really hard. And so as soon as we started like falling below that, we lost a lot of our customer base, and once your reputation starts getting tarnished, it's really, really hard to win it back. I mean, parents don't give you a second chance. So, anyone else? Yeah.
Specific criteria used to throw in the towel? Like, is there anything specific or the numbers that you said we just can't do this?
Yeah, so the question was there a specific set of metrics, or were there specific metrics that convinced us that we were done? It wasn't any one metric. It was sort of a cumulative view of everything that was going on, looking at what our user acquisition cost was doing relative to our value of a customer, comparing that with where we needed it to be to rapidly scale through multiple channels. And we realized that those things just were no longer going to work out the way that we thought they would. Well, we couldn't figure out how to really make them work. So it's kind of just, at some point you hit this confidence interval that, all right, it's better if we try to do something else. Yeah.
This mentality of launch before you're ready and rapidly iterating can sometimes lead to quality loss. So how do you balance like reaching more users versus churning and burning some of your own process?
Yeah, so the question was, launching before you're ready and iterating can lead to quality loss. So how do you balance getting new customers by launching new features versus pissing off your existing customers because you break something? It can be a tricky balance, but part of it is in defining what your problem space is, right? And so defining the things that you're going to launch and iterate on. And your customers, if you're good to them, and your users, if you're good to them, and you've done good things for them, they'll deal with a little breakage as long as you don't break the core of what they want. If you ever break something that's really, really important to them, you got to be apologetic, and you got to do good customer service and explain to them what happens. You know, Google goes down, Gmail goes down every once in a while, and it's crazy, but you like expect that it's normally up, and you know they're trying to do good things for you. Same thing happens with Facebook, although you could argue their users aren't, like their users are locked in a different way. But it's really always a balance in trying to figure out. You know, in the scope, in the decision of launch, don't launch, it's basically like if it's going to get out there and not, and it's like slightly imperfect, do it, experiment with it, and be able to roll it back. And roll it back as soon as you realize it's like hurting your customers and hurting people who love you. And then do it again and again. Yeah. Yeah.
How did you know what to focus on? For example, you got 10 customers,
Yeah.
you got 20 different opinions.
Yeah. So when we first started talking to customers, how did we know what to focus on? So this is kind of where one of the things we tell founders is to work on problems that you have and things that you know. So I had been a tutor, I had tutors, so I knew the initial set of criteria we had to work with, and so spared the first iteration cycle. But then you got to keep talking and you got to form consensus to some extent. You don't want to just like go with exactly what users tell you, because sometimes they'll tell you different things. It's a judgment question, right? There's no scientific method to say, do this thing. When Steve Jobs launched the iPhone, it wasn't like they had a whole bunch of user groups who told him, hey, we want like a computer in this form factor that makes calls or whatever. He kind of understood what people would want eventually. For us, it was constantly talking to the users, figuring out whether or not what they wanted matched up with how we thought the product should grow, and ultimately making product decisions based on our own expertise on how to fit that advice in. Both. Did we measure by talking to them or by quantitative methods, both. You have to combine both. There's pretty much never an excuse not to talk to your customers in person. Even when you get to scale of hundreds of thousands or millions of users, you can still talk to pieces of them. This is why the community sites or community forums work really well as you scale, because you start seeing the best, the most active users start rising to the top, and you engage with them, because they are your biggest fans and your best customers. And if you make them happy, they'll spread the love of how happy they are with you, right? So you got to do both. Yeah. So how did we find our users to do user testing? So initially, the people that we targeted, it was like friends and friends of friends, but then it was our actual users. We had people paying us money to use our service, so we would call them on the phone, email them, call them on the phone, badger them, go meet them for coffee, just find any way we could to go talk to them. We never used a user at a testing service to find us probable people. We actually focused on the people that we had, because we had them, so it made sense to use them. Yeah. Yeah, so I mentioned that we cut 1 million pages, or the 1 million pages we had ended up being one of the things that Google penalized. So we made that optimization, and whether or not that was actually bad for users, that was an optimization we did. What? So you're saying that's not product, but I disagree. Part of our product was the search interface, the browse interface of how people actually located a tutor. And so the tutors were distributed across this large corpus of pages, and how they interacted with each individual page was the start of their experience with our product. So were they unqualified users because of search engines? Even if they were qualified users, they weren't having the best possible experience on those pages. Yeah. Yeah. So how many people were working, and our revenue numbers. So I'll tell you how many people were working for us. But we had, at our peak, we had, I think, 10 full-time, 5 part-time, and then a whole group of distributed people doing even more part-time work. So 15 to 20 people. I'm taking it to the grave with me. No, we were generating good revenue. We were profitable. We were edging on profitability, growing quickly. It was going well for a while. What? How much money did we raise? We raised just shy of $2 million. Just shy of $2 million. Anyone else? Oh, last question. Yeah. So how do you do user acquisition when your users are not your circle of friends? It's like a weird niche. I would go and talk to them. I don't know, every niche of users is going to have slightly different behaviors. Go find them and talk to them. Find out where they hang out, what they do, what they read, and you can start building off of that. So. Yeah, there's no science to user. There's some science to user acquisition, but the science is the science is constantly iterating on and trying different things, and then measuring, and then trying it again and altering it. So, all right, thank you very much.